Good morning, everybody. It's Jim Ransom again with another edition of Morning Jim for poetry lovers. Today's program is called Ransom and Ransom, which means a program that has some poems by my favorite 20th century poet, Crowe Ransom. He's replaced T.S. Eliot in that pantheon. And a couple by me, James Ransom. Crowe Ransom, and I've said this before since I've read some of his poetry, is no relative of mine. I could add that the Ransoms, the clan, or members of the clan, from more than one place in East England, left late in the 17th century, coming to America, and some went south and some north. They met again only in the Civil War. My family is the northern branch, the less inspired branch, I would say. And Crowe Ransom was from the southern branch, and he lived between 1888 when he was born and 1974 when he passed away. Crowe Ransom studied at Oxford, and upon returning to America, he became a scholar and professor. Spent most of his years as a professor at Kenyon College. He is one of the founders of what came to be known as the agrarian movement. A group of writers included Alan Tate and Robert Penn Warren, who were mainly writing from a rural southern viewpoint. Crowe Ransom was often given to quaint modes of speech, quaint in our understanding of the word today, which has helped to establish the unique character of his poetry. He also, along with Alan Tate and Robert Penn Warren, I mentioned earlier, created something called the New Criticism, in which literary efforts were carefully considered via their details. Now let's go forward and read one of his poems. This came from the selected edition of his poetry, and it was published, I think, in the 1960s, the same year that he won the National Book Award for his books and his poetry. This is called Bells for John Whiteside's Daughter. There was such speed in her little body, and such lightness in her footfall, it is no wonder her brown study astonishes us all. Her wars were bruited in our high window. We looked among orchard trees and beyond, where she took arms against her shadow, or harried under the pond the lazy geese, like a snow cloud dripping their snow on the green grass, tricking and stopping, sleepy and proud, who cried in goose, alas, for the tireless heart within the little lady with rod that made them rise from their noon apple dreams and scuttle goose fashion under the skies. But now go the bells, and we are ready. In one house we sternly stopped to say we are vexed at her brown study, lying so primly propped. We don't know how John Whiteside's daughter died, but we know that it came as quite a shock to the funeral party. We are faced with the unexpected death of this child, which seems at odds with the way she is described to have lived, doesn't it? Greatly at odds. I'm going to switch over now to a poem of my own called Concerning Beauty. Here's a New Focus. I should precede reading the poem by telling you that I wrote this poem a couple of years ago during the COVID epidemic, when we were all told to mask up and that would be good for us. Not true, of course, but we did it anyway. So here's Concerning Beauty, a new focus. I'm looking at you in a new way. Your eyes, your lashes, and your brows, the lines on your forehead when you laugh, replace the flare of your nostrils and the curl of your lip. I see you have cut a slit in your mask so you can sip your coffee. Is there lipstick on your cup? I need to see if it's really you here with me. My eyes are beset. Reset. My brain is reprogrammed. My mind repaints your full face, your smile, the wrinkles at your eyes, and the color of your hair. Curls or waves are now my focus. I find I must recongregate decades of reading the human face. We are flesh, we are bone. Only face to face, we aren't alone. I had fun writing that poem. It helped me to get rid of a lot of frustration brought on by the mask wearing. Somebody would come to my door, or I would be out for a walk, or I would go in and try to get a cup of coffee, and I knew the people who were milling around in there. I knew them, but I didn't know them. I didn't realize how much I depended on their full face image. So, I still haven't gotten over the mask wearing because I still see it happening. The most common place I see it is when I look in the car next to me on the street and there's nobody in it but the driver who is masked. Oh dear. Here's another poem I wrote many years ago, and I think it is one that John Crowe Ransom would have understood and sympathized with, given his English background. That is where he got his education. It's called Flora MacDonald's Ghost. I'll read it first and then give you a little backstory. The epigram will give you some of it. It was written after a visit to the battlefield of Culloden Moor. And Flora MacDonald helped save Bonnie Prince Charlie from capture by the British in the uprising of 1745. The words she sang me in her burnished song echoed hollow o'er the shining water, echoed long and faded off the end of sky, from a cliff of rock, as if in falling soft and weakened, they would mock the martial meaning that the words once had. The distant battles, drums and piping sad. It was a song in language all but lost, known now to scholars and to music, not to most. She shall not want for succor when bringing back the past, if music comes on with it, a crescendo at the last. I see her shrouded on the misty Scottish shore, her muted tartan blowing o'er the windy moor. Oh, give me bagpipes, cymbals, and the rattling drum. When we march to end of life, we will not want to hum. Yeah, that was fun to write. And the backstory here is interesting. At Culloden Moor, the British were able to put down a rebellion by the Scottish Highlanders who were trying to restore the Stuart monarchy in Scotland and get rid of the German interlopers, the Georges, that had taken over. And Prince Charles Edward Stuart was Bonnie Prince Charlie. And in order for him to escape from Scotland, he was garbed in a woman's servant's clothing and pretended to be the maid of Flora MacDonald, which was a famous family in Scotland, and the head of that family was the head of Clan MacDonald. And at one time I actually met his descendant, the present Lord of the Isles. They have a castle on the Isle of Skye. Ah, yes, those days are gone. The effort of pretending to be the maid of Flora MacDonald was probably more than Prince Charles Edward Stuart could stand. He made it on the ship and off to England, but he was never happy about being made to be a maid. He was sheltered by the French. He never wrote to thank Flora MacDonald for saving his life. Okay, now here's another poem by John Crowe Ransom, which has always been a favorite of mine. And it's another poem about death in a way, but not of a human being or a child. It's called Janet Waking. Beautifully Janet slept till it was deeply morning. She woke then and thought about her dainty feathered hen to see how it had kept. One kiss she gave her mother, only a small one she gave to her daddy, who would have kissed each curl of his shining baby, and no kiss at all for her brother. Old Chucky, she cried, running across the world upon the grass to Chucky's house and listening. But alas, her Chucky had died. It was a transmogrifine bee came droning down on Chucky's old bald head and sat and put the poison. It scarcely bled, but how exceedingly and purply did the knot swell with the venom and communicate its rigor. Now the poor comb stood up straight, but Chucky did not. So there was Janet, kneeling on the wet grass, crying her brown head, translated far beyond the daughters of men, to rise and walk upon it. And weeping fast as she had breath, Janet implored us, wake her from her sleep, and would not be instructed in how deep was the forgetful kingdom of death. Yes, that's a great poem, I think, by John Crowe Ransom. I think it's one of the best of his short poems. And when he is anthologized, you're apt to see that poem selected as the only one, or maybe one of two or three. The Romantic Realism school of poetry died out during the Great Depression, or perhaps as a result of it, when the traditional sentimentality, especially in the South, of an era of poetry foundered on the rocks of poverty. But all times have their rising and falling stars. That's all for today. Hope you will tune in again next week for another session of Morning Gym Poetry. I'd love to announce the readings in advance, but I seldom know myself what they're going to be. I know that's a failing and a flaw, but we'll all have to live with it. Bye now.